The murmurs began the moment Maya Carter stepped into the auditorium of Crestwood Prep. Her thrift store blazer stood out like a stain against the sea of tailored uniforms and the weight of every privileged stare pressed down on her shoulders. "Let's see what the charity case can do," drawled Jason Whitmore, tossing the microphone at her with a smirk. The metallic clang as she caught it silenced the room for half a heartbeat before laughter erupted sharp as broken glass. Even Mrs. Lawson, the debate coach, offered a strained smile from the stage, her manicured fingers tapping impatiently against her clipboard. The spotlight swung wildly, trapping Maya in its glare. As she walked forward, the squeak of her worn sneakers against the polished floor, drawing fresh snickers. Jason leaned toward his girlfriend, loud enough for Maya to hear. "This'll be better than cafeteria drama." But beneath his perfect hair and Crestwood crest pin, she caught the flicker of uncertainty, like he'd just thrown a match into dry grass, and realized he couldn't control the burn. The heat of the lights made her skin prickle, mixing with the scent of overpriced cologne from the front row. Backstage, the other competitors' kids who'd had vocal coaches since elementary school watched with bored pity. For a heartbeat, Maya's throat locked. Then from the third row, someone fake coughed, sparking another wave of laughter. Something inside her snapped. She remembered the morning's 4 a.m. alarms, her little brother's asthma treatments lined up on the counter, the way her mom's hands shook counting tips from her double shift. This wasn't just a microphone. It was a grenade. Maya stepped closer, her voice slicing through the silence like a blade. "You want a show?" she asked, soft as a threat. The room stiffened. Jason's smirk faltered. And then she began, not with the prepared speech, but with the truth they'd never let her say. The words poured out raw and relentless about lunch trays, shoved from hands about scholarship kid, whispered like a slur about how they'd mistaken her silence for surrender. By the time she finished, the silence wasn't mocking. It was stunned. Mrs. Lawson's pen had dropped. Jason's phone, still raised to record, hung limp in his hand. Maya let the microphone drop with a thud, the sound echoing like a door slamming shut, or maybe opening. The scent of burnt toast lingered in the tiny kitchen as Maya tucked the last of her grandmother's pills into the weekly organizer. "You're gonna be late, Misha," her grandmother murmured, her knotted fingers brushing Maya's wrist. The bus ride to Crestwood Prep was a study in contrasts: the cracked vinyl seats, the way the driver sighed when her transfer pass took 3 swipes to scan the sudden shift from peeling billboards to iron gates, and imported maple trees lining the school's driveway. A new tension crackled in the halls that morning. Jason Whitmore's crew had plastered the lockers with blown-up memes of Maya's debate performance, her face photoshopped onto a cartoon character holding a "Will work for food" sign. The laughter hit her like a physical shove, but what stung worse was the way Mr. Reynolds, her history teacher, walked right past it, clearing his throat like he hadn't seen a thing. In AP Lit, the discussion turned to Langston Hughes. Maya's hand shot up first. "He wasn't just writing about dreams," she said, voice steady. "He was writing about what happens when you're told yours don't matter." The room went still. Then Jason's friend Tyler snorted, "Someone's trying real hard to stay on scholarship." Mrs. Ellis opened her mouth to scold him or agree. Maya would never know because the fire alarm blared to life. Chaos erupted. Students shoved toward the exits, but Maya froze when she saw the words spray-painted across her locker in crimson. "Know your place." The paint was still dripping. Her stomach lurched. This wasn't just cruelty. It was a threat. That night at the community center's open mic, Maya clutched her mother's notebook like a lifeline. The host, Uncle D, took one look at her face and whispered, "They got you spinning, baby, spin 'em back harder." The crowd's energy was a living thing, all snapping fingers and shouts of "Preach." When Maya stepped up, she didn't recite poetry. She told the truth. About the locker. About the way Mrs. Ellis had suddenly found grading discrepancies in her last essay. About how silence was just violence with better manners. Back home, her grandmother waited up a cup of horchata steaming on the table. "You got that fire in your eyes," she said softly. Maya touched the notebook's frayed edges. "Mom would have fought back, right?" Her grandmother's smile was sad. She did, and they fired her from that teaching job for it. The revelation hit like a gut punch. Maya had always believed her mother's career ended because of budget cuts. Now, staring at her reflection in the chipped bathroom mirror, she understood the system had been trying to erase them long before she ever stepped foot in Crestwood. The nightmare came again. This time she wasn't just mute on stage, she was faceless. But when she woke, gasping at 3 a.m., something had changed. The fear was still there, but beneath it pulsed something hotter, sharper. A plan. The notice for the Voices of Tomorrow competition gleamed under the fluorescent lights of Crestwood Prep's hallway, the $50,000 prize bolded like a dare. Maya traced the words with her eyes, already mentally allocating the money, her grandmother's medication, maybe even a deposit on an apartment that didn't smell like mold and broken promises. Behind her, Jason's voice slithered through the chatter. "Think they'll give pity points if you cry about your rent on stage?" His friends erupted in laughter, but Maya didn't flinch. She'd stopped counting how many times they'd reduced her life to a punchline. That night, the eviction notice crinkled in her pocket as she climbed the stairs to their apartment, each step heavier than the last. Luxury condominium conversion. It read the words, "sterile and final." Her grandmother was humming in the kitchen, stirring a pot of beans with a wooden spoon. "Mija, you're home late," she said, turning with a smile that faltered when she saw Maya's face. The eviction notice hit the table like a gunshot. For once, her grandmother had no proverbs, no Dios aprieta, pero no ahorca, just silence. The next day, in Dr. Langley's literature class, the discussion turned to canonical merit. "Spoken word lacks the structural discipline of sonnets," he declared, adjusting his glasses. "It's emotional spectacle, not art." Maya's pen hovered over her notebook, where her latest piece, The Calculus of Survival, was scribbled in furious margins. Tyler, Jason's right-hand lackey, smirked. "So it's like yelling in rhythm." The class tittered. Dr. Langley chuckled. "An oversimplification, but not inaccurate." Maya's hand shot up. "So if Emily Dickinson wrote about her attic instead of her garden, would that be too emotional for the canon?" The room went dead silent. Dr. Langley's mouth tightened. "That's a reductive comparison, Miss Carter." The cafeteria was worse. Jason held court at his usual table, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "My dad's on the Voices judging panel," he bragged, twirling his fork. "They're looking for elegance, not some ghetto sob story." Maya's plastic fork snapped in her hand, but then a new voice cut through the noise. "Funny," said Elijah Carter, the quiet transfer student who always sat alone with his sketchbook. "I heard they're tired of rich kids reciting Robert Frost like it's a damn TED Talk." The room froze. No one ever challenged Jason. Elijah didn't even look up from his drawing as he added, "But what do I know? I'm just here on merit." The air crackled. Jason's face flushed beet red. Maya caught Elijah's eye just a flicker, and for the first time she didn't feel like she was fighting alone. That night she rewrote her Voices piece by flashlight, weaving in Dr. Langley's dismissal, Jason's sneers, the eviction notice's cold print. Her grandmother appeared in the doorway, holding a steaming mug. "When your mama was your age," she said softly, "she wrote a poem so sharp it got her suspended. Principal called it incendiary." Maya's breath caught. "What did it say?" Her grandmother's eyes gleamed. "Same thing yours does, I'm still here." The nightmare came again, but this time when the laughter rose, Maya didn't choke. She laughed back louder, uglier, a sound that shook the walls. When she woke, her fists were clenched around her mother's notebook. The pages were no longer just paper. They were kindling. The cafeteria incident followed Maya like a stain. As she bent to clean the spilled food, Jason leaned down, his breath hot against her ear. "You're like a bad penny, always turning up where you don't belong." The teacher who'd witnessed it all just clicked her tongue. "Accidents happen, Miss Carter. Move along." On the bus ride home, Maya's phone buzzed with notifications. A group chat she wasn't part of had leaked screenshots of her subsidized lunch ticket photoshopped onto a meme of a begging hand. Elijah slid into the seat beside her, blocking her view of the screen with his sketchbook. "Don't give them the reaction they want." he muttered, flipping to a page where he'd drawn her mid-performance at the community center, her face alight with fire the Crestwood kids had never seen. The apartment was an icebox. Maya's grandmother sat wrapped in 2 blankets, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically despite the cough that racked her chest. "Mrs. Calloway's son offered you a job at his garage," she said suddenly. "Full-time, benefits." The unspoken "if you quit school" hung between them. Maya's stomach twisted. She pictured Dr. Langley's smug smile when her seat emptied Jason's triumphant, "I told you she wouldn't last." Then her grandmother reached under the couch, pulling out a dented cookie tin. Inside were stacks of bills, 1s and 5s, some folded small as if tucked away quickly. "My emergency fund," she said, her crooked fingers smoothing a wrinkled 20. "For when the world tries to tell us we have no choices." The amount wouldn't cover a month's rent, but it was the look in her grandmother's eyes that undid Maya the fierce, unbroken pride. That night, as wind whistled through the cracked window, Maya opened her mother's notebook to a page she'd never dared touch before. There, in bold strokes, was a poem titled, "When They Tell You to Get Out." The last line burned into her roots grow deepest when the storm tries to rip them loose. The next morning she walked into Crestwood with her head high, Elijah falling into step beside her. When Jason's crew started their usual chorus of whispers, Elijah suddenly veered off, slamming his palm against the Voices of Tomorrow poster. "Hey, Maya," he called loud enough for the whole hall to hear. "You gonna let these trust fund babies define what real poetry is?" A hush fell. Teachers' heads turned. For the first time, Maya saw uncertainty flicker across Jason's face, the fear of someone who'd never had to fight for his place. She stepped forward, her voice carrying down the marble hallway. "No, but I'll sure as hell show them." The storm was coming. And this time, Maya wouldn't just survive it, she'd rewrite the rules. The cafeteria incident followed Maya like a stain. As she bent to clean the spilled food, Jason leaned down, his breath hot against her ear. "You're like a bad penny, always turning up where you don't belong." The teacher who'd witnessed it all just clicked her tongue. "Accidents happen, Miss Carter. Move along." On the bus ride home, Maya's phone buzzed with notifications. A group chat she wasn't part of had leaked screenshots of her subsidized lunch ticket photoshopped onto a meme of a begging hand. Elijah slid into the seat beside her, blocking her view of the screen with his sketchbook. "Don't give them the reaction they want," he muttered, flipping to a page where he'd drawn her mid-performance at the community center, her face alight with fire the Crestwood kids had never seen. The apartment was an icebox. Maya's grandmother sat wrapped in 2 blankets, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically despite the cough that racked her chest. "Mrs. Calloway's son offered you a job at his garage," she said suddenly. "Full-time, benefits." The unspoken "if you quit school" hung between them. Maya's stomach twisted. She pictured Dr. Langley's smug smile when her seat emptied Jason's triumphant, "I told you she wouldn't last." Then her grandmother reached under the couch, pulling out a dented cookie tin. Inside were stacks of bills, 1s and 5s, some folded small as if tucked away quickly. "My emergency fund," she said, her crooked fingers smoothing a wrinkled 20. "For when the world tries to tell us we have no choices." The amount wouldn't cover a month's rent, but it was the look in her grandmother's eyes that undid Maya the fierce, unbroken pride. That night, as wind whistled through the cracked window, Maya opened her mother's notebook to a page she'd never dared touch before. There, in bold strokes, was a poem titled, "When They Tell You to Get Out." The last line burned into her roots grow deepest when the storm tries to rip them loose. The next morning she walked into Crestwood with her head high, Elijah falling into step beside her. When Jason's crew started their usual chorus of whispers, Elijah suddenly veered off, slamming his palm against the Voices of Tomorrow poster. "Hey, Maya," he called loud enough for the whole hall to hear. "You gonna let these trust fund babies define what real poetry is?" A hush fell. Teachers' heads turned. For the first time, Maya saw uncertainty flicker across Jason's face, the fear of someone who'd never had to fight for his place. She stepped forward, her voice carrying down the marble hallway. "No, but I'll sure as hell show them." The storm was coming. And this time, Maya wouldn't just survive it, she'd rewrite the rules. The coffee in Maya's cup had gone cold, but the fire in her chest burned hotter than ever. Ms. Diaz, former Slam champion secret ally, tapped the competition form with a chipped nail. Carmen Rivera doesn't just judge performances, she dismantles systems. The name sent a shock through Maya. Rivera's poem Borderless had been her mother's favorite. A new thought struck her. If I enter as myself, Crestwood will know about my channel. The Midnight Voice video's raw, unfiltered pieces about food stamps and eviction notices had thousands of views, but were carefully hidden from her school life. Ms. Diaz didn't blink. Let them see. Authenticity is your armor, not your weakness. The library at dawn became their sanctuary. While the rest of Crestwood slept, Maya practiced until her voice cracked Ms. Diaz, drilling her like a boxing coach. Again, louder, like you're shouting down every lie they ever fed you. One morning, Elijah appeared in the stacks, his sketchbook open to a new drawing, Maya on stage light bursting from her mouth like a supernova. For luck, he said, tucking it into her bag. The day of submissions, Jason intercepted her at the office. Cute hustle, Carter, he sneered, blocking the drop box. But Daddy donated a new auditorium. You really think they'll pick you over me? His confidence wavered when Maya smiled. Funny, I heard Carmen Rivera once made a billionaire cry with just 12 syllables. That night the apartment buzzed with nervous energy. Maya's grandmother pressed a small velvet box into her hands inside her mother's thin silver chain, the one she'd worn at her own last performance. She'd be so proud, her grandmother whispered, fastening it around Maya's neck. The metal was warm against her skin like a hand on her shoulder. At the competition, the stage lights blinded her momentarily. Then she saw them, Elijah, in the front row. Ms. Diaz, standing defiantly beside Dr. Langley, her grandmother's small frame glowing in the VIP section, and Jason gripping his perfectly typed sonnet, suddenly unsure. Maya stepped to the mic. The silence was absolute. For one terrifying second, the nightmare-threatened mouth opened, no sound. Then she touched her mother's chain, and the words came like a flood. She didn't perform. She testified. When she finished, the applause wasn't polite. It was a quake. Carmen Rivera stood first, tears cutting through her meticulous eyeliner. Jason's father on the judging panel looked like he'd swallowed glass. Backstage, Ms. Diaz handed Maya a folded note from Rivera. They tried to bury you. They didn't know you were a seed. The $50,000 check was almost an afterthought. That night, Maya uploaded a new video, no hood, no alias. The title flashed across the screen, Hello Crestwood, Let's Talk About Belonging. The view count exploded before she even closed her laptop. The morning training sessions with Ms. Diaz became Maya's lifeline. As they worked through breathing exercises in the hushed library, the scent of old paper and floor wax wrapping around them like armor, Ms. Diaz dropped a bombshell. Carmen Rivera requested your Midnight Voice videos be shown to the entire judging panel. They've been watching them all week. Maya's water bottle slipped from her fingers. That's against protocol. Ms. Diaz smirked. Carmen doesn't play by Crestwood's rules. But the harassment escalated. During third period, Maya found her desk vandalized. Know your place carved deep into the wood. When she reported it, Principal Collins sighed. Miss Carter, with the competition coming up, perhaps you're overstimulated. The dismissal burned worse than the words on the desk. That afternoon, Elijah intercepted her at the bus stop with urgent eyes. Jason's dad pulled strings. They moved the competition judging to the Crestwood Country Club. The unspoken truth hung between them, the club that had denied membership to Maya's grandmother 20 years ago for incompatibility with club values. The night before the competition, Maya's grandmother collapsed in the kitchen. At the AR, the doctor used words like pneumonia and compromised immune system, while Maya's fingers twisted the eviction notice in her pocket. When her grandmother woke frail but lucid, she gripped Maya's wrist. You listen good, mija. You go to that stage tomorrow and make them see you. Not the scholarship kid, not the charity case, you. The morning of the competition, Crestwood Country Club loomed like a fortress. The valet sneered at Maya's bus pass. Inside, Jason's crew lounged in designer outfits, their laughter cutting off when she walked in. The judge's table sat on a raised dais, Carmen Rivera's piercing gaze the only familiar thing in this sea of polished mahogany and golf trophies. Then, disaster. As Maya took the stage, Jason's voice rang out, "Don't choke now, Midnight." The mic screeched feedback. For one paralyzing second, Maya froze. Then she saw Ms. Diaz mouthing, "Breathe Elijah's" white-knuckled grip on his sketchbook and remembered her grandmother's hands pressing that velvet box into her palms. She stepped back from the mic. Let the silence stretch. Then, without amplification, she began her voice raw and carrying the way she'd once called for her grandmother through their burning apartment building when she was 7. The room stilled. Even the waiters stopped pouring water. When she finished, there was no applause. Just Carmen Rivera, standing removing her judge's badge and walking to the stage to embrace Maya in front of everyone. The photo would go viral by noon. Carmen's tear-streaked face next to Maya's defiant one, Jason's stunned expression in the background. That night, the Midnight Voice channel hit 100K subscribers. The first message popped up from an editor at The New Yorker. The second was from Jason's father's law firm, a settlement offer for the unfortunate desk incident. Maya deleted them both. She had new words to write. The Wakefield Center's marble floors reflected Maya's scuffed shoes as she stepped inside the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and ambition. A security guard eyed her wrinkled blazer but said nothing, probably assuming she was part of the cleaning staff. Backstage, the other competitors lounged in designer rehearsal clothes, their warm-up routines polished by years of private coaching. Jason held court in the corner, demonstrating his piece for an adoring circle. When Maya walked by, he stage whispered, "Check the lost and found, guys. I think someone's maid wandered in." The first round went exactly as planned. Maya delivered a technically perfect but soulless sonnet, the kind of poem Crestwood would approve. The judges nodded politely, their pens scratching identical notes, adequate, conventional, safe. Jason smirked from the wings, already mentally spending his prize money. Then came the finals. Maya stepped onto the stage, the spotlight blinding. For a breathless moment, she saw everything: the bored judges, Jason's smug grin, the way Ms. Diaz's fingers dug into her program. Then she closed her eyes and heard her grandmother's voice. "Make them see you." When she opened her mouth, she didn't recite. She unleashed. The poem began with her mother's words. "They told me my tongue was too sharp for poetry, so I made a blade of it." Then spiraled into Maya's own truth. The eviction notices. The cafeteria sneers. The way Principal Collins had called 911 when she saw Maya waiting for her grandmother in the Crestwood parking lot, assuming a brown girl in a hoodie must be trespassing. The words built like a storm, each line stripping away Jason's smirk layer by layer. Halfway through, a commotion erupted in the back. Maya didn't stop even when she recognized the hacking cough, her grandmother leaning on Elijah's arm, having discharged herself from the hospital. The old woman's eyes locked onto Maya's, blazing with pride. The silence when she finished was absolute. Then Carmen Rivera stood her chair, screeching. "That," she declared to the room, "is what happens when you mistake survival for silence." Jason's father on the judging panel looked physically ill. The scorecards came back unanimous. As Maya accepted the trophy, Jason lunged from the wings. "She cheated," he spat. "That wasn't even her own work." Carmen didn't blink. "All art is theft, Mr. Whitmore. The difference is—" She gestured to Maya's shaking hands, the tear-streaked face of her grandmother in the back. "She steals from life. You steal from SparkNotes." That night, Maya's phone exploded interview requests. A literary agent, even a DM from Jason's ashamed younger sister. "How do I unlearn everything they taught me?" But the most important message came from the Wakefield Center itself. An envelope slid under their apartment door, a full scholarship to their summer intensive, plus a paid internship. Her grandmother traced the embossed lettering with trembling fingers. "Mia," she whispered, "your mother would—" Maya finished the sentence for her, be writing her next poem right now. Outside, the first real snow of winter began to fall, covering Crestwood's perfect lawns in unblemished white. For the first time, Maya saw it not as something that would melt, but as a blank page. The backstage air grew thick with anticipation as Maya's turn approached. Just before she was called, she noticed Elijah slipping through the stage door, his sketchbook clutched tight. He pressed something into her hand, a charcoal drawing of her grandmother's hands cradling Maya's face, the lines rough but alive. "For when you need to remember who you are," he whispered before disappearing into the shadows. When the stage manager called her number, Maya stepped forward only to have Jason's foot accidentally trip her. She caught herself hard against the wall, her mother's notebook slipping from her grasp. Pages scattered across the floor. The stage manager sighed. "We're on a tight schedule, Miss Carter." As she knelt to gather the papers, Maya's fingers brushed a page she'd never seen before, a half-finished poem in her mother's handwriting tucked deep in the notebook's spine. The title alone stole her breath. "For my daughter when they try to silence you." The words blurred as her vision swam. This wasn't just paper, it was a baton passed across time. The audience murmured as Maya finally took the stage 30 seconds behind schedule. The spotlight burned hotter than judgment. For her first piece, she delivered exactly what they expected, a technically flawless but hollow villanelle about autumn leaves. The judges nodded politely. Jason smirked from the wings, already texting his victory party plans. But when the top 10 were announced and Maya advanced, something shifted in the room. For her second piece, she let one raw truth slip through a single line about food stamp vouchers sticking to her palms in the checkout line. The audience's sharp intake of breath was louder than any applause. By the finals, the energy had changed. When Maya returned for her last performance, she saw Ms. Diaz arguing with a security guard near the fire exit, her grandmother still in her hospital wristband being escorted to a seat Elijah had saved. The judges shifted uncomfortably as Maya approached the mic. She began with her mother's newly discovered words, then wove in her own about locker room slurs and eviction notices about how trauma lives in the body like secondhand smoke. When she described the way Jason's crew had laughed as they destroyed her notebook, a gasp rippled through the crowd. Jason's father, seated with the other VIPs, actually stood whether to protest or leave. No one would know because Carmen Rivera grabbed his elbow and forced him back down. The silence when Maya finished was different this time, not absence of sound, but presence of something being shattered. Then the standing ovation began at the back of the room where the community center regulars had packed the cheap seats. It spread like wildfire until even the Crestwood parents were reluctantly on their feet. Backstage, Jason cornered her. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "That scholarship's as good as gone." Maya just smiled and held up her phone, already recording their entire exchange. "Say that again for the live stream." The trophy was almost an afterthought. The real victory came hours later when Maya's grandmother, still weak but radiant, pressed a yellowed newspaper clipping into her hands. It showed Maya's mother at 17 winning the very same competition decades earlier. The headline read, "Housing Project Teen Stuns Judges with Truth About American Dreams." As they left the Wakefield Center, snow beginning to dust the streets, Maya realized something. The stage hadn't been her finish line. It had been her starting block. Maya stepped into the spotlight for her second performance, the weight of Elijah's drawing still warm in her pocket. The audience fidgeted, still buzzing from Travis's calculated performance. She adjusted the mic stand with deliberate slowness, letting the silence stretch until even the judges looked up from their scorecards. Then she shattered their expectations. "Opportunity isn't a door," she began, her voice dropping the polished cadence from her first round. "It's a brick." A pause. "Thrown through a window when they won't let you in." The room froze. This wasn't the safe, grateful scholarship student they'd applauded earlier. This was raw truth, each word sharp as broken glass. She spoke about the charity case, whispers about teachers who praised her essays but crossed the street when they saw her after school. About how Travis's inspirational stutter story would play very differently if his last name wasn't Whitmore. Halfway through, a commotion erupted in the wings, Jason's father arguing with a stagehand demanding they cut her mic. But Carmen Rivera stood silencing him with a look. Maya didn't falter. She pulled her mother's poem from her pocket, the paper trembling in her hands as she read the final lines. They told me my voice was too loud for poetry, so I turned the volume up. The silence when she finished was electric. Then from the back row a single pair of hands began clapping Elijah standing defiantly alone. The sound spread like wildfire until even the Crestwood parents were forced to join or be conspicuous in their refusal. Backstage, Jason blocked her path, his face mottled with rage. "You'll never set foot in Holloway again after this," he spat. Maya just smiled and tapped her lapel pin, the tiny camera Ms. Diaz had insisted she wear. Already live streaming to 200K followers, Travis. Say hi to your dad's campaign donors. When the finalists were announced, Maya's name came first. Jason's wasn't called at all. As the crowd erupted, she looked past the stage lights to where her grandmother sat weeping in the front row, holding up Maya's mother's photo like a torch passing between generations. The trophy would come later. The real victory was watching Jason's father storm out his son's perfect future, unraveling in real time. Maya stood in the wings, rolling her grandmother's silver chain between her fingers as Travis took the stage for his final performance. His voice dripped with barely concealed fury as he launched into Natural Order, a thinly veiled rant about unearned advantages and true merit. The Holloway section ate up their applause, a little too loud, a little too desperate. Then it was Maya's turn. She walked to center stage empty-handed, no notebook, no props. Just the mic and the truth. "You want natural order." Her voice cut through the lingering energy of Travis's performance like a knife. "Let's talk about the natural order of my grandmother working 30 years as a housekeeper but still needing me to steal toilet paper from school." The room went deathly still. She spoke about the natural order of Holloway's gates, staying locked to kids from her neighborhood unless they could run fast enough for a sports scholarship. About the natural order of teachers assuming she'd cheated when she aced her SATs. With each word, she peeled back the veneer of Travis's privilege until his so-called triumph over adversity looked exactly like what it was, a performance for pity points. Halfway through, a shout came from the audience, Jason's father, red-faced and sputtering about inappropriate content. Carmen Rivera didn't even glance his way. She just leaned forward, her pen hovering over her scorecard like a sword about to fall. When Maya finished, the silence was heavier than any applause. Then, from the back of the auditorium, a single voice called out, "Again!" It was Elijah. The word spread through the crowd like wildfire until the entire room was chanting, even some of the Holloway students caught up in the moment. The judges exchanged glances. Then Carmen Rivera did something unprecedented. She gestured for Maya to take the mic again. This time, Maya didn't perform. She taught. "Watch closely, Holloway." She said, her voice quiet, but carrying. "This is what happens when you mistake someone's survival for silence." She repeated her final lines, but slower now, letting each word land like a hammer blow. By the time she finished, even Travis's most loyal friends were staring at their shoes. The trophy presentation was almost an afterthought. When they called Maya's name, the roar from the crowd shook the rafters. But the real victory came after, when Jason's father stormed the stage to protest, only to have Carmen Rivera hand him the mic and say, "By all means, Mr. Whitmore, explain to everyone why your son deserves this more." He took one look at the sea of recording phones and walked out instead, Travis trailing behind him like a deflated balloon. That night, Maya's grandmother hung the trophy next to her mother's photo. Two testaments to what happens when the natural order gets disrupted. And as Maya scrolled through the flood of messages from other scholarship kids saying, "You said what we couldn't," she realized something important. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The applause hadn't even begun to fade when Maya saw movement in the front row, Travis's father lunging toward the stage, his face purple with rage. "That's not poetry, that's propaganda," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger. The mic caught his words and amplified them through the auditorium, freezing the standing ovation mid-celebration. Maya didn't flinch. She simply turned to Carmen Rivera, who was already on her feet. The legendary poet took the spare microphone from the judge's table with the calm of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. "Mr. Whitmore," Carmen said, her voice dripping with quiet venom. Your son just compared marginalized students to prey animals. Would you like to explain the difference between propaganda and truth to these cameras? She gestured to the live stream crew, their lenses now trained squarely on his spluttering face. A new sound cut through the tension, Maya's grandmother standing on creaking knees in the third row beginning to clap. The slow, rhythmic applause spread like wildfire, until even the Crestwood parents joined in their discomfort, drowned out by the roar of the crowd. Backstage, Travis grabbed Maya's arm as she exited. "You'll regret this," he hissed. But before he could continue, Elijah materialized beside them, his phone recording. "Keep going, man," he said cheerfully. "Your dad's already trending for all the wrong reasons. What's one more clip?" When the judges returned with their decision, the auditorium fell silent. Carmen didn't bother with the usual platitudes. She simply held up Maya's scorecard, a perfect 10, and said, "Some voices can't be contained. Some truths can't be silenced. The winner of this competition isn't just the most talented poet we've heard tonight. She's the bravest." As Maya accepted the trophy, she spotted Ms. Diaz wiping her eyes in the wings. But the real victory came later when she found her grandmother surrounded by a group of young black girls, all clamoring to touch the trophy like it was proof of something miraculous. That night, as Maya lay in bed, her phone buzzed non-stop interview requests. College scouts, even a DM from Travis's younger sister. How do I unlearn everything they taught me? But the most important message came from an unknown number. Your mother would be proud. CR. Outside her window, the first snow of winter began to fall, blanketing Crestwood's pristine lawns in unblemished white. For the first time, Maya saw it not as something that would melt, but as a blank page waiting for new stories. The backstage chaos swirled around Maya like a storm. Flashing cameras shouted questions, hands reaching to grab her arm. Ms. Diaz planted herself as a human shield, but it was Elijah who created the real diversion. He flipped his sketchbook open to a page that stopped the nearest reporter, culled a caricature of Travis's father mid-tantrum, the caption reading, "Privilege recognizing its expiration date." As the press scrambled for photos of the drawing, Maya spotted Carmen Rivera cutting through the crowd with the intensity of a warship. "Come with me," the poet commanded, leading Maya to a side office where her grandmother waited, still clutching the photo of Maya's mother. "Your mother competed in this very event 20 years ago." Carmen revealed, placing a yellowed program in Maya's hands. The cover showed a teenage girl with Maya's eyes under the headline, "Project Kid Stuns Judges with Raw Truth." She won too, until the board revised the scores after receiving complaints about inappropriate content. The revelation hit like a lightning strike. All those years her grandmother had kept silent, all those times she'd warned Maya not to make waves. It wasn't fear-talking. It was strategy. Outside, a commotion erupted. Travis's father was demanding a review of the judging process, his voice carrying through the thin walls. Carmen didn't hesitate. She threw open the door and declared loud enough for every microphone to hear, "Mr. Whitmore, your son lost to a better poet. If you'd like to discuss reviews, perhaps we should start with how his last piece plagiarized a lesser-known Audre Lorde poem." The color drained from the man's face. In that moment, Maya understood Carmen hadn't just been judging a competition. She'd been laying a 20-year trap. The real victory came later that night when Maya's phone buzzed with a notification from Holloway Academy's headmaster. "Urgent meeting requested to discuss our diversity and inclusion policies." Attached was a forwarded email from every major donor threatening to pull funding unless changes were made. As Maya scrolled through the avalanche of messages, college offers, interview requests, a viral hashtag, "more than a charity." Case her grandmother placed a steaming cup of horchata beside her. "Drink up, mija," she said, her voice thick with pride. "Tomorrow we fight for someone else's victory." Outside, the first snow continued to fall, covering Crestwood's manicured lawns in perfect, unmarked white. For the first time, Maya saw it not as something that would melt, but as a promise that no matter how many footprints tried to mark it, the world would always leave space for new beginnings. The embossed invitation to the National Youth Poetry Summit wasn't the only surprise waiting in Maya's mailbox. Beneath the formal letter lay a handwritten note from Carmen Rivera. "The stage is yours now. Don't waste it on their applause. The words sent a shiver down her spine, not from fear, but from the weight of what came next. At Crestwood Prep, the changes went deeper than polite smiles. Dr. Langley cornered her after class, sweating through his Oxford shirt as he stammered about revising the curriculum to include more diverse voices. Maya simply handed him a list Audrey Lord Danes Smith, her mother's unpublished work. "Start here," she said, watching his Adam's apple bob as he scanned the titles. But the real shift came when Principal Whitman called her into his office. Travis's father sat stiffly in the corner, his tailored suit unable to hide his discomfort. "We're establishing a new scholarship," Whitman announced, avoiding Maya's eyes, "for students who overcome adversity." Maya let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Then she leaned forward, her voice deceptively soft. "Call it what it is, a reparations fund for all the kids you ignored." She pushed a notepad across the desk. "I'll need 3 signatures from community organizers on the selection committee." The National Summit performance went viral before she'd even left the stage. Back home, her grandmother hosted a watch party that spilled into their apartment hallway. Neighbors from the old building, kids from the community center, even Ms. Diaz with her infamous grating face, softened by pride. That night, as Maya added new lines to her mother's notebook, her phone buzzed with a notification. War Travis. Whitmore had posted a tearful apology video. Elijah's reply popped up immediately. "Delete this and try again without the crocodile tears." She laughed, then froze when she turned the page. There, in her mother's handwriting, was a poem she'd never seen before. "When my daughter takes the mic." The date at the bottom stopped her heart, the day before the car accident. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos. But in that moment, Maya understood something fundamental. The victory wasn't in the trophies or the trends. It was in the notebook's remaining blank pages, waiting for her to fill them with words that would outlive them all. The next morning, she walked into Crestwood without her blazer, the community center logo bright on her chest. No one said a word. Not even Jason. Some silences, she'd learned, were sweeter than applause. The victory had cracked open doors, but Maya knew the real work was just beginning. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Elijah. "Check the news," it read. A major publisher had announced an anthology of marginalized voices, and Carmen Rivera had personally recommended Maya as editor. The attached article included a scathing quote from Carmen: "We don't need more diversity initiatives. We need revolution." That afternoon at the community center, Maya found a surprise waiting, a dozen kids from her old neighborhood, notebooks in hand, eyes wide with hope. "We signed up for your workshop," said a tiny girl with braids gripping a worn composition book. "My mama says you're proof we don't gotta stay silent." Back home, her grandmother was cooking pastelon, a celebration meal, while humming along to the local news. On screen, Principal Whitman announced Crestwood's new chapter. His smile strained as the reporter grilled him about the leaked emails showing years of ignored discrimination complaints. Maya slipped into her room where her mother's notebook lay open to a fresh page. She added 2 lines to her newest poem. "They told me I was breaking barriers when really I was building bridges." The ping of another notification interrupted, this time from Travis's sister, asking to meet privately. "I have proof," the message read, "about how they rigged last year's competition against another scholarship student." Maya smiled and reached for her jacket. Some victories weren't about stages or spotlights. They happened in quiet diner booths and community center basements, in the passing of torches nobody else could see. As she stepped into the evening air, the city sounds wrapped around her like an old friend: honking cars, distant laughter, the rhythmic beat of someone's music floating through an open window. For the first time, it didn't feel like noise. It sounded like the beginning of everything. Want more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things? Subscribe for weekly videos that don't just inspire, they ignite change. Because the world doesn't need more voices in the background. It needs yours front and center. Hit subscribe now and join the movement.